The chamber buzzed with the usual noise. Arguments layered over whispers, hum of microphones, the restless shuffle of aides trying to look busy. Then, in a blink, silence. Jerry Moran, buttoned up, measured, a man whose restraint had become his armor, leaned into his microphone. Eyes lifted. Pen stopped mid-scratch. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, his voice deliberate, steady enough to slice through the tension. "I want to thank you for your clarity today." The words hung in the air like an aftershock. No one breathed. Crockett blinked once, twice, as if replaying the moment in her head. Did he just thank her? The same Jerry Moran, who rarely broke rank, who'd made a career out of polite distance and procedural calm. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Phones came out. Reporters exchanged that silent look that meant you're hearing this too, right? Every second stretched longer than the last. Crockett's lips parted, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes, half disbelief, half cautious pride, said everything. Somewhere in the back, a cameraman whispered, "Keep rolling." And as the feed streamed live, the country began to notice. Comments poured in, headlines formed in real time. Moran praises Crockett flashed across screens like a glitch in the Matrix. Because no one expected this. Not from him. Not for her. And just as the murmurs started to fade, Moran leaned forward again, ready to finish what he'd started. But what came next didn't just quiet the room. It would echo far beyond its walls, forcing a divided nation to look twice at the kind of respect it thought no longer existed. America didn't pause for much anymore. Outrage had become background noise, scrawlable, predictable, exhausting. But this. A Republican senator commending Jasmine Crockett, the Texas Democrat known for eviscerating hypocrisy with surgical precision, that wasn't background noise. That was a jolt to the national bloodstream. News anchors stumbled over their intros, unsure whether to frame it as civility or strategy. Cable networks played the clip on loop, each pause dissected like a political autopsy. Pundits leaned forward in their chairs, asking the question millions whispered behind screens. Why did he do it? Jerry Moran had built his brand on quiet restraint. A man of order, respectability, unshakable decorum. The kind who measured his words twice before uttering one. He wasn't a firebrand, wasn't chasing headlines, and certainly wasn't known for crossing invisible party lines. Yet in that moment, he did. And on the opposite end of that exchange stood Jasmine Crockett. Everything Washington pretended to dislike, yet secretly feared. Young. Brilliant, unapologetically black, and unafraid to match intellect with intensity. Where Moran hid behind politeness, Crockett wielded truth like a blade. Her voice carried the kind of conviction that made powerful people uncomfortable. So when a man molded by tradition publicly praised a woman molded by resistance, it wasn't just bipartisan, it was biblical. Two worlds collided in one sentence, and America didn't know how to react. Some saw sincerity, others saw optics. But beneath the noise was something deeper, an aching hunger for honesty in a city starved of it. Because maybe, just maybe, what people wanted wasn't another fight. Maybe they wanted proof that respect hadn't completely died. And as the algorithms churned and hashtags multiplied, a new tension took shape, not between parties, but between cynicism and hope. Was Moran's gesture a fleeting slip of humanity, or the first spark of something bigger? If you believe moments like this deserve more attention than partisan chaos, hit subscribe right now because this channel doesn't chase noise. It unearths the moments that actually shake the system. For a nation trained to expect mockery and scandal, this unexpected flash of grace left everyone off balance. It wasn't supposed to happen. Not in this climate. Not between these two. And yet, it did. As America argued over motives, one truth lingered, somewhere beneath the spin. Shouting and the cynicism, something real had cracked through the armor. But was it genuine respect or political theater dressed as virtue? The answer waited in what came next. As the story pulled us into the minds of both players, the cautious conservative and the fearless reformer, about to find themselves bound by one unpredictable moment that neither of them saw coming. Jerry Moran was the kind of senator Washington used to admire before politics turned into a blood sport. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy. His power came from consistency. For decades, he spoke with the careful precision of a man who knew every word could ripple into headlines. To his colleagues, he was dependable. To his critics, forgettable. But in a city addicted to noise, forgettable had become its own kind of rebellion. He came from Kansas Plains, where respect wasn't a performance, it was a practice. Where men didn't interrupt, didn't grandstand, and didn't mistake cruelty for strength. For years, that code kept him steady. But lately, even Moran had felt it slipping. The shouting, the lies, the endless theater pretending to be governance. Somewhere along the way, politics had stopped being about persuasion and turned into humiliation. Every week, he'd watch hearings devolve into viral bait. See colleagues perform outrage for applause and feel the air thicken with something toxic cynicism. It wasn't a headline villain. It didn't storm podiums or filibuster bills. It seeped through the cracks, slow, quiet, corrosive. It whispered that everyone was faking it, that decency was naive, that nothing in Washington was real anymore. And maybe, for a while, Moran believed it too. He'd learned to keep his head down, let the chaos burn itself out, until Jasmine Crockett appeared. A freshman Democrat with the fire of someone who hadn't yet learned how to fake it. Someone who still believed the truth could cut through the noise. Her raw conviction didn't just challenge her opponents. It challenged him. Because if sincerity still existed, if someone could stand in that chamber and mean every word, then maybe cynicism wasn't the final truth after all. And that terrified him. Before she ever set foot in Congress, Jasmine Crockett was already fighting battles most politicians only debated about. In Texas courtrooms, she stood shoulder to shoulder with those who couldn't afford the luxury of influence. People crushed by a system that treated justice like a privilege. She didn't wear power suits back then. She wore exhaustion, purpose, and fire. Every case, every long night, every dismissal from men who thought she'd fade, it all forged something unbreakable. When pundits call her angry, they forget what that anger is made of. It's not rage for attention. It's the sound of frustration turned into fuel. Years of watching lawmakers play politics with people's lives had burned out her patience, but not her hope. In her world, being soft-spoken meant being ignored. So she got louder, sharper, uncompromising. They called her loud. Until they realized her voice carried the weight of 1,000 unheard stories. She didn't come from legacy or lineage. She came from grit, the kind that doesn't beg for validation. It earns it one confrontation at a time. When she walked into hearings, she didn't see opponents. She saw barriers that needed breaking. Her questions weren't rehearsed sound bites. They were demands for honesty. Her tone wasn't aggression. It was precision wrapped in defiance. And that made her dangerous, not because she was reckless, but because she was real. In a chamber obsessed with optics, she refused to perform. Her conviction was inconvenient, her confidence disarming. And while her critics tried to paint her as chaos and heels, her supporters saw what the cameras often missed: composure beneath pressure, intellect behind every barb, and moral clarity that cut through the fog. And that voice was about to make even her critics stand still. Because in a place where truth is often negotiated, Jasmine Crockett was about to remind everyone, you can't bargain with authenticity. The hearing began like every other, loud, rehearsed, dripping with posturing. Cameras clicked, tempers simmered, and everyone seemed more interested in sound bites than substance. But Jasmine Crockett didn't come to perform. She came to expose. Her questions cut clean through the fog of excuses, each one sharper than the last. Across the long mahogany table, a witness stammered. His numbers didn't line up. His timeline crumbled, and the silence that followed his pause was deafening. Crockett didn't fill it. She let it hang, heavy, deliberate. The kind of silence that makes truth echo louder. Then came the interruptions. A congressman leaned back, smirking, trying to derail her with a patronizing jab. Another muttered something under his breath, something about tone. The classic deflection. But Crockett didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye, her voice steady as a heartbeat. If defending the truth makes me emotional, then maybe this room needs more emotion. For a split second, time froze. You could almost hear the collective inhale. Aides stopped typing. Reporters stopped whispering. The words weren't shouted, yet they landed like a gavel. Every ounce of condescension in that room suddenly felt smaller. Crockett leaned back, gaze unwavering, as if daring the silence to challenge her. Her point wasn't just made, it was felt. The very air seemed to realign around her conviction. And that's when it happened. From across the table, Senator Jerry Moran, the soft-spoken conservative who rarely broke composure, looked up. His expression, usually guarded, shifted. Not amusement. Not irritation. Something else. Respect. It flickered behind his calm exterior. Subtle, but unmistakable. No one noticed at first, except the cameras. They caught the moment his eyes narrowed slightly, studying her not as an opponent, but as someone who had just reminded the entire room what integrity sounds like. The usual chatter didn't resume. The posturing paused. Even the witness seemed to shrink back into his seat, realizing the game had changed. Because in that instant, Crockett hadn't just won an exchange, she had disrupted the script. The one where passion is dismissed and truth gets drowned out by theater. She had rewritten the rhythm of the hearing, and everyone could feel it. What he did next wasn't applause. It was respect, and it stunned everyone watching. That's the moment everything turned. Not through volume, not through fury, but through a quiet force that demanded acknowledgement. And though no one said it aloud, every person in that chamber knew it. Something in Jerry Moran's carefully built wall had just cracked. And what came through next would shake Washington to its core. For a few heartbeats, the room stayed frozen, suspended between disbelief and awe. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong in Washington, where silence is usually a weapon, not a witness. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless, her hands clasped, eyes steady, pulse barely visible beneath the polished desk light. The air was thick with unspoken questions. And then, from the other side of the chamber, came a sound no one expected. The soft clearing of a throat. Senator Jerry Moran leaned forward. Deliberate. Calm. The cameras shifted instinctively toward him. The hum of machinery echoing like thunder in that quiet hall. For years, Moran had played his part with precision. The moderate Republican, who valued order over passion, civility over confrontation. But now, even he looked like he was stepping off script. He pressed the mic button, and the faint click might as well have been an explosion. Congresswoman, he began, his tone steady but weighted with something raw. I don't share all your views, but today, you reminded me what public service should sound like. The words didn't echo, they landed. Clean, heavy, unrehearsed. For a split second, the room forgot to breathe. Staffers froze mid-scribble. A cameraman lowered his lens. On social media, the live stream's comment section erupted in disbelief. Did he just say that? Across the table, Crockett blinked, the smallest trace of confusion softening her usual composure. She wasn't used to this genuine acknowledgement, untainted by agenda. You could see the question flicker behind her eyes. Is this real? Politics paused, and something human broke through. No applause, no grandstanding. Just truth, raw and unfiltered, leaking through the cracks of a system built to contain it. Moran continued, his voice quieter now, but steady. I came here to debate policy, not personalities. But when I see conviction without calculation, it deserves respect. That single sentence detonated online before the hearing even adjourned. Clips spread like wildfire. Republican senator praises Jasmine Crockett on live TV. Hashtags forming within minutes. But inside that room, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was the look on every face. Shock, confusion, and for some, something close to envy. Crockett finally exhaled, leaning slightly forward, her voice composed but edged with warmth. Senator, I appreciate that. I think we'd get a lot more done around here if more of us remembered why we came. There was no smugness in her tone, no triumph, just quiet grace. The kind that lands deeper than any victory speech. Moran nodded. Just once. A gesture small enough to be missed unless you were looking for it. And everyone was. In that exchange, the villain of cynicism, the idea that nothing sincere could ever happen in this building, began to crumble. It wasn't a moral epiphany or some teary bipartisan moment. It was two people, from opposite ends of the ideological map, meeting on the narrow strip of common ground that still exists between decency and exhaustion. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't safe. It was the sound of honesty breaking protocol. Outside the hearing room, the world was watching the playback on loop. Journalists rushed to draft think pieces. Commentators stumbled over how to categorize it. Was it rebellion, reconciliation, or something else entirely? But to those who had grown numb from outrage fatigue, it felt like oxygen. Aid whispers cut through the stunned air. One murmured, "He just ended his career." Another whispered back, "No. He just remembered why he started it." And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett, the woman they once dismissed as too loud, too emotional, too unpredictable, sat at the center of it all. Not as a disruptor, but as a mirror. She reflected the part of America that still believed truth could pierce through the noise if spoken with enough heart. "Respect," Moran repeated quietly, almost to himself this time. Those 8 letters carried more power than any filibuster or floor speech that day. Because respect in that chamber, in that climate, they didn't agree on policy. They didn't need to. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, someone in that building listened without waiting to respond. As Crockett gathered her notes, the camera zoomed in on her expression, calm, humbled, but resolute. No smirk. No gloat. Just quiet acknowledgement that something rare had happened. Something neither party spin nor headlines could dilute. And as the hearing chair called for a recess, Moran didn't look away. He simply nodded again, an unspoken message passing between them. Keep going. One word of respect had just echoed louder than every shout, and what it unleashed next would ripple far beyond that room. The moment didn't just stay in the hearing room, it detonated across the internet. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. TikTok stitched it, Twitter rebranded it, YouTube replayed it in slow motion with dramatic music overlays. The caption read simply, "When truth silences politics." Hashtags began stacking like wildfire. Hashtag Crockett moment. Hashtag Moran respect. Hashtag when politics listens. Each one a digital heartbeat pulsing through timelines that hadn't seen sincerity trends in years. On cable news, anchors scrambled to find the right tone. Some cautious, others awestruck. CNN called it an unexpected show of grace. X tried to spin it, then hesitated. MSNBC ran it on loop, commentators visibly holding back tears. In living rooms across America, people who'd long muted the noise of Congress suddenly turned the volume up. Teachers played it in civics classes. Veterans shared it with captions like, "This is why we served." Even hardened cynics, the ones who swore off politics entirely, wrote. Didn't expect to feel something watching this. The memes came fast, of course. A split screen. Moran and Crockett, mid-hearing, with the caption, "Plot twist. Respect still exists." Another. A screenshot of her quote, "If defending the truth makes me emotional." Layered over protest footage and graduation speeches, it wasn't a mockery. It was admirable to wear a mask. Then came the think pieces. Columnists call it a reset moment. Influencers dub it the clap heard across the aisle. Everyone had a take, but beneath the noise was a rare consensus. Decency had broken through the algorithm. When did decency become breaking news? And that question lingers, uncomfortably honest, piercingly true. Because maybe the real shock wasn't Moran's words or Crockett's composure. Maybe it was the collective realization that somewhere along the way, we'd started treating empathy like a plot twist. A nation tired of shouting found itself listening. And as the hashtags kept climbing, as hearts flooded the comment sections, one truth became impossible to ignore. Sincerity hadn't died. It had just been waiting for someone brave enough to speak it out loud. The noise faded, but the meaning didn't. For once, the headlines weren't about scandal or spin. They were about something far rarer. Decency. This wasn't left versus right. It was right versus cynicism, because that's what this moment was really about. Not agreement, but acknowledgement. Two people standing on opposite ends of the spectrum, daring to meet in the middle without losing themselves. Crockett didn't soften her convictions. Moran didn't abandon his. Yet in that fragile intersection of honesty and humility, They reminded the nation of something we'd almost forgotten. Disagreement doesn't have to mean disrespect. For millions watching, it wasn't politics, it was a mirror, a reflection, of what America could still be when courage speaks louder than calculation. When listening becomes an act of strength, not surrender. Crockett showed that truth still has a pulse. Moran proved that respect still has a place. Together, without planning it, they gave a weary nation a reason to hope. No handshake, no photo op. It's just a fleeting moment of honesty that echoed far beyond Capitol Hill. A reminder that the power to restore faith in democracy doesn't live in party platforms, but in people brave enough to act human in a room full of performance. Two lawmakers divided by ideology, but united briefly by integrity, because maybe, just maybe, the real victory isn't in winning the argument, but in remembering that truth doesn't need sides, it just needs a voice. Respect doesn't trend often, but when it does, it cuts deeper than outrage ever could. What happened between Moran and Crockett wasn't theater. It was a reminder that conviction still matters, that listening hasn't gone out of style, and that integrity still stands taller than noise. Their exchange proves something simple but powerful. Truth still moves people when it's spoken with courage. If you believe courage deserves more light than chaos, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And drop your thoughts in the comments, because every voice that values respect strengthens this message. Every click, every share, every comment tells the algorithm that decency still matters. So before you scroll to the next headline, remember this: outrage fades fast, but integrity echoes. Stand with respect, speak for truth, and never underestimate the power of your voice.